listener production.
Hey, Tara Cassidy with you and welcome to The Briefing. With just 4 days to go until the election, all eyes are on Labor and the Coalition, but that's not where everyone's votes are going to go.
Unfortunately, the major parties have had this space for a very, very long time, and it's the 21st century and it is time to have independence. They're not transparent, they don't tell the truth, they twist the truth, and that's a real problem out there.
That chat with Senator Jacqui Lambie and someone else who says they'll quit politics the second they achieve what they've promised for Australia is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, it's time for the headlines with Chris Spyrou this Tuesday, the 29th of April.
Morning, Tara, and morning to you listening wherever you are. As you mentioned at the top, we are just days away from hitting the polls officially. And while we've spent what feels like an eternity talking about the cost of living, there are still a bunch of other issues that are proving to be quite important for voters this week. Among them are the environment, national security, and the sway of younger voters and how it could impact Parliament, specifically if we end up with a minority government after the weekend. So these are key issues that also formed part of a fiery debate between Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek, Greens leader Adam Bandt, outgoing Liberal MP Paul Fletcher and others on the ABC's Q&A last night. When asked specifically about which policies each major party would part with to win government, neither of the majors wanted to answer that directly, no surprises there, both just insisting that a majority government was the only way to go.
We're determined to win a majority government. He's made clear that there's no deals.
So that's, of course, the Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek talking about Prime Minister Anthony Albanese effectively ruling out any deals, probably firing some shots there towards the Greens. And then we have Paul Fletcher from the Coalition.
We have had majority government in Australia since World War II with one exception.
Sure, but that would be 19 seats for you.
To 2013.
Meanwhile, Trump and the country's defence capabilities also came up last night after new data from YouGov found 2/3 of Aussies now say that the United States can't be trusted as a security ally, which has marked a major shift in views over recent months, about a 25% swing according to the poller. Now, during the panel discussion, Tanya Plibersek also took the opportunity to take aim at Greens leader Adam Bandt, who she claimed hadn't supported Labor's environmental policies to date.
Instead, you teamed up with the Liberals to block environmental law reform in the same way you teamed up with the Liberals scheme last time Labor was in government. We've added 15 gigawatts of renewable energy to the grid. That's 3 times Snowy Hydro. It's more than the nuclear plants will ever deliver if they are ever built.
So obviously some people who aren't big fans of the Coalition's nuclear plan in the crowd there. Now, both of those topics have really become big election issues this year, haven't they, Chris?
Yeah, they have. And to your point, it's very interesting to hear the applauses and the different applauses that are awarded during a Q&A recording. I think, as time goes on, unfortunately, they're just becoming more and more polarising, and you can tell which half of the room stands with what issue and which half stands with another issue. So very, very interesting to see this playing out very close to the election. And look, the environment and the climate was a central theme last night. We do have new stats from YouGov, which has shown that 4 in 5 young voters feel climate action will help decide their vote this election. So that's 4 in 5 of young voters. I don't know about you, but my circles, unfortunately, we're talking more about HECS, bulk billing, and anyone who's offering us a tax cut. Unfortunately, the environment isn't at the top of our list. I don't know. What about you? What about your circles?
Yeah, I think most of the things we've been talking about have been more relating to the cost of living, the hip pocket type things. So it is interesting to see these stats, but perhaps we were just not among that polling group cohort, Chris. The first day of the Bondi Junction stabbings inquest has heard killer Joel Couchy had a preoccupation with death and mass killings before the fatal attack. The inquest into the violent rampage that killed 6 and injured 10 in April last year heard there was evidence of planning and that the knives used by Couchy were purchased years earlier. It was also told that the 40-year-old had made a note to check out malls and where to run, while he'd also bookmarked pages about serial killers and mass stabbing incidents. Now, on the day of the massacre itself, he also searched for information about the 1999 Columbine high school shooting in the US.
Yeah, the inquest is expected to go for 4 weeks and to hear from about 40 witnesses. It will also look into Couchy's deteriorating mental health, his interactions with related services, the police and security responses, with the aim of preventing future tragedies. And hey, while we're talking about crime, today is also the beginning of the highly anticipated mushroom triple murder trial of regional Victoria woman Erin Patterson. She's accused of serving a beef Wellington dish with mushrooms in it that allegedly led to the death of 3 people, including her in-laws and a 4th person being hospitalised back in 2023. A jury's expected to be selected today, with first witnesses expected to be called tomorrow.
Overseas now to Russia, where Vladimir Putin has announced a 3-day ceasefire with Ukraine to mark the 80th anniversary of the victory of the Soviet Union and its allies in World War II. The Kremlin says the temporary pause in all fighting would run from May the 8th to the 11th and is based on humanitarian grounds, calling on Ukraine to follow its example. Now, that's been called out by Ukraine's foreign ministry, who is once again pushing for a 30-day immediate ceasefire and has criticised Russia's announcement as performative.
Yeah, it is worth noting the reason that they're calling it performative is because on the 9th of May, so the second day of this fresh ceasefire proposal, coincides with the Great Victory Parade in Moscow, which a number of dignitaries, including China and Brazil's presidents, as well as the Prime Minister of India, are set to attend. The timing there has not been lost on anyone in Ukraine. And this, of course, all comes as pressure from the US to bring an end to the war is ramping up, and just 10 days since a similar 30-hour truce was announced by the Kremlin for Easter. That was an incredibly limited ceasefire in scope. It only related really to what was going on in the air, but it brought absolutely no calm to the region, with both sides accusing the other of serious violations.
And a tourist attraction dedicated to the world's favourite blue healer will stay in Queensland for another year following its wild success. Bluey's World in Brisbane, the life-sized recreation of the hit TV show's iconic house and neighbourhood, first opened in November last year, and it was set to wrap up in September, but now it's going to be around for a little longer, till at least February next year.
Yes, since opening, at least 200,000 people have visited the attraction, a milestone they celebrated recently, with Bluey's World contributing an estimated $18 million to the Queensland economy. So,
wow.
I mean, yeah, the tourism minister has come out to say that they love this idea. A bunch of Brisbane councillors are saying that they love it, and obviously it's bringing heaps of people to the state and the city. But it's such a cute and great celebration of an iconic character that's really cemented our culture across the globe. I love it.
Yeah, me too, 100%. It's literally put Brisbane on the map. People in America know Brisbane now, which I'm sure people probably didn't before. I can say that I'm in Brisbane. But also, I think, honestly, just make Bluey the official Olympics mascot already.
Oh,
2032 in Brisbane. Make it Bluey. I'm saying it. I'm calling it. Come on.
Oh, I love it so much. And hey, while we're speaking of calling things, not that anyone here is going to call the election, but there are calls in and outside of Canberra for more independent voices to enter our politics. My chat with the sharpshooting soldier turned Senator Jacqui Lambie is coming up in the second half of this episode, as well as my chat with someone who doesn't want to be in politics for any longer than he has to. Stick around, that's coming up for you next. The countdown is on, Australia, and if you haven't voted already, here is some quick voting 101 for you. When you get to the polls, you're going to get 2 ballot papers, a green and a white one. The smaller of the 2 is the green one. That is so much more easier to fill out. And that's where you vote for the federal member or MP you want representing your electorate in the lower house of Parliament. So that's the green room in Canberra, where the PM and opposition leader typically yap and yell at each other. Whichever party manages to win the majority of these seats, so 76 out of the 150 up for grabs, can then form government with their leader, the Prime Minister of Australia. Then we have that big old white piece of paper. That's where you vote not for your federal MP, but for your state or territory's senators. Each state has 12 of these, while the territories have 2 each, and these pollies hang out in the Red Room or the Upper House, so think people like David Pocock, Pauline Hanson, and even Penny Wong. Now, on both ballot papers, you'll see candidates from Labor, the Coalition, and the Greens. You'll also see a bunch of smaller fringe parties and a range of independents who, as we've spoken about a heap on this pod, are on the rise. Someone who wants to see more of them entering Canberra by next week and who's vying for re-election in Tasmania is the sharpshooting soldier-turned-Senator Jacqui Lambie, who heads up the Jacqui Lambie network and has senators running on tickets in New South Wales, Queensland and South Australia. Jacqui, welcome to the briefing. Before we get to the role and rise of smaller independent voices in Canberra, what do you think are the top 3 issues for Australians in the lead up to this election?
Yeah, well, it's definitely the cost of living out there. There's no doubt about that. It is putting the housing issue out there still massive. That we're not doing anything about that overnight. I don't think we've actually picked up properly from COVID. We haven't rebounded as well as what we should have done, especially that, I think that generation that's sort of maybe that 16, 18 to 25, 28, I seriously think it affected them a lot more than what we're actually looking. So that is really worrying for me. And what do we do about that? I'm just a little bit worried about them. I'm just a little bit, I think it's knocked their resilience around and their self-confidence around a little bit. So for me, they're probably the 3 biggest issues I see going on around at the moment. And they're a future, they're a generation. And I just don't think people are quite seeing it how I am, especially the politicians.
Well, something that the politicians have picked up on the power of is the power of the influencer, something we were talking about off mic earlier. Do you think they were a little late to the party, or do you think they've hit it at the right time?
No, I think the influence, like you've had the influencers, the clothes, the lipsticks, finding those political influencers is a little bit of a niche job. I mean, Christ almighty, who wants to be a bloody political influencer? God love you. But do you know what I mean? I think finding them, the influencer's already been out there, but with politics, you actually want someone that's serious, does this, studies this, look this, and I don't think we have a great, I mean, they're coming. There was one up there for the budget, I believe, or a couple up there for the budget, and I know there was people complaining. I thought, well, you tell me, because I can't get through to that generation, and if I can pass it through them to get through, well then who cares? They're disengaged. So how do we engage them? So try influencers. God help it. If influencers can do the job I can't do, then bloody good on them, because they're just not listening to us. So, and I just think they're just so disengaged, and I just think they tend to be slightly engaged, not a whole heap. I mean, we don't want to give them all depression, but, just slightly a bit more engaged. And if we need to use influencers to do that, why wouldn't we?
Why do you think young people are so disengaged from Australian politics?
Well, I mean, you've only got to watch Question Time. It is absolutely disgraceful, okay, the way that they carry on, all that sort of stuff. They're just not interested in it. Because the older generation's dying off. They don't have as many elderly voting now. It's a lot of this stuff going in. And they're a little bit behind the 8 ball with that. They probably should have been trying to do this and reach out to them about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But there's a place in the world for influencers, especially doing that sort of stuff. I think it's great. If they can do a job I can't do, which is get through to that next generation, then please come and do it. Because you would hire actually somebody, if you're trying to reach somebody in a normal business, you will pay for someone to come in because you couldn't reach them to get your product out there, okay?
Yeah,
and that's
sense.
what we're doing. If I can't get the product out there, so please help me.
Well, Jacqui Lambie, I'm going to go on the record and say you are reaching the youth. The youth are seeing you. People like me and my circles and our listeners.
Jesus Christ. We've got Jacqui Lambie's youth on the loose. Holy shit.
Why would you say God help the country? I think you have some very measured and sensible ideas. I think especially when it comes to cutting through as an independent, there's a growing appetite from young voters where we're getting sick of Labor and Liberal. We really are.
So. It's pretty boring stuff then. It's the same shit every day, isn't it? And it doesn't matter if it's blue team or red team in. I know, but independents hold them accountable.
I'm curious, and I'm going to preface this by saying we were doing an episode on the Trumpet of Patriots, and I sat through Clive Palmer's National Press address.
God, you survived it. Good for you.
No further comment on that one. However, he did use a word that I liked and I thought was very fitting. He said that Labor and Liberal, they operate as a uni party.
Yes.
How true is that?
Yeah, I'd say that that would be correct. I mean, Clive Palmer's been in the business of politics, I reckon, now for about 40 years. He was up there with Joh Bjelke-Petersen in the Queensland days, so he's got a long history of politics. But he is right. Unfortunately, the major parties have had this space for a very, very long time, and it's the 21st century, and it is time to have independence. If they'd have been doing the right thing all the time, then you wouldn't have any independence up there, okay? They're not transparent. They don't tell the fucking truth. They twist the truth. They do all this. And that's a real problem out there, okay? And your people, you're that younger age is a lot smarter than what I was, okay?
Don't give us too much credit, Jacqui.
Yeah, because you've got the news and influence. You've got speaking to each other straight on. It's live, okay? We didn't have that. I think for independents out there, they're a good thing. They hold them accountable. They're transparent. And I think, and you know, you've seen the first lot of tills. I thought they were great to have that first lot of tills up there. I don't care how they got up or anything like that. They were hard-working women. They've made a name for themselves, and they've done that really, really well. And I can't take that away from them. And I think they've absolutely banged on the job there. And that's why more people are getting interested in coming in as an independent and fighting. It's this that stops them, darling.
That's the money. That's the money fingers.
Yeah,
that's the money fingers. Jacqui Lambie, thank you for carving out a few minutes to chat with us on the briefing.
You're very, very welcome. Good on you. Have a great day.
Now let's hear from someone whose micro party has definitely made a name for itself, but doesn't hold any seats in the lower or upper house at the moment, despite being on a heap of ballots right around the country. Miles Hunt is the Legalise Cannabis Party's lead Senate candidate in New South Wales. Miles, welcome to the briefing. A lot of us would have seen your party on our ballot papers. Some of us may have even put a number next to it as a big old lol, but what exactly does your party stand for?
It's in the name. We're interested in legalising cannabis in a slow and methodical way. We'd like to see the expungement of criminal records for those charged with possession, small quantities, allow people to grow their own stuff, which is basically connected and related to cannabis.
So in what ways does your party extend beyond its namesake? How would you address some of the things that everyday Australians are concerned about at the moment, aside from legalising cannabis?
It's sort of interesting being a party that is focused on one main issue. And obviously, if you legalise cannabis, you're going to reduce the $5 billion a year we spend on criminalising cannabis. You can tax and put an excise on it like there is with alcohol and generate money for the country. We're talking billions of dollars a year. So that creates potential investment in other things, whether it's health and reducing any harms associated with the legalisation or broader issues in the community, like education, things like that. It sort of allows, I think, relationships between police and community to be better if you remove that criminalisation. In terms of other broader issues that might arise, we advocate for civil liberties, privacy, human rights, compassion, personal freedom, anti-discrimination, tolerance. So if there's an issue that is outside of cannabis, in essence, and I was in the Senate and we had to vote on that issue, we would try to take those party beliefs and consider it on its merits.
I'm curious to know, does your party then cease to exist if you achieve your objectives of legalising cannabis, or does it just take on a different form?
We want to disappear. We're the only politicians who want to change something and then leave the building. We're done. Obviously, the decriminalisation process and the legalisation process is slow, right? Australia's a conservative country. It takes time to get these sort of changes, particularly big changes around an issue, which is, we've had prohibition for 100 years in this country. I mean, a lot of other countries are going that way. North America, Canada, Germany, Thailand, heaps of countries are moving towards legalisation. So I think it's inevitable. And once we legalise, we have to deal with issues that need to be, the way you regulate, whether it's just allowing homegrown and decriminalising possession, or if you're going to move to a model where you actually have a place where you can legally buy a joint or, a hash cookie, and how you regulate it, what sort of tax, excise, because you have to balance. If you have the tax up too high, then you create a black market again, which has sort of happened with tobacco recently, right? As I said, we want to be safe and we want to reduce risk. So you don't want cannabis advertising and children using it. But yeah, ultimately, if cannabis can be legalised and the hemp industry opened up, we're done, I'll be out of a job, hopefully.
Obviously, there's a preconception and there are stereotypes around cannabis and people who use cannabis. How is your party trying to overcome some of those preconceptions and some of those, I would say, cultural and social barriers?
I mean, there's a sizable chunk of the population who use cannabis on a regular basis. Certainly young people, 20 to 29. I mean, we're talking 30% have used cannabis in the last year. Nearly half the population have used cannabis at some point in their life. Cannabis is not gender specific. It's across the community. It's cross cultures. There's people with chronic illnesses and injuries who use it for pain and anxiety and a myriad of other benefits medicinally. There's older Australians who are getting into cannabis as a potential pain relief or other medicine, which is potentially better for them to deal with than, say, opiates or something like that. And you have people who use cannabis recreationally and will smoke a joint instead of a beer, who have given up alcohol and other drugs and use cannabis instead. So, I want to get to the point in this country where, it's okay to talk about your cannabis use and not feel afraid or feel stigmatized by that. That would be nice.
Aside from the stigma, I want to pick up on something that you mentioned there. You mentioned opioids. I guess one of the other hurdles that your party, I'm assuming, faces is this idea that cannabis is a bit of a gateway drug and, it'll open up the floodgates to legalising more drugs, harder drugs that, take a greater toll on our health and criminal system. What do you say to people who have those thoughts and have those critiques?
Well, I think it's a gateway out drug, really. I mean, a lot of people use it to free themselves from addiction. So I think that's a stereotype and I think it's incorrect. The majority of Australians, the first drug they take is not cannabis, it's alcohol. And in terms of if you're on a night out and you drink alcohol, it will lower your inhibitions and potentially lead you to make a decision around other drugs, whereas cannabis doesn't do that. I'm not saying there's no risk to cannabis. Of course, it's a psychoactive substance which can cause a difficult situation with someone in the wrong setting and the wrong use. So, of course, we want to reduce that risk, and I think legalisation regulation is the way, but I do think we've got to be careful with the gateway drug idea because I think it's a false narrative.
Before we let you go, I was reading your bio and you are a practicing lawyer, so I'm going to ask you a almost legal-like question. What do you think your prospects of success are in this upcoming federal election?
Wow. Let's just say the chances for Legalise Cannabis Party in this election are, I think, the best we've ever had. I think that the legalisation of cannabis across the world and the use of medicinal cannabis, those things have opened up the subject a bit more, but also people are sick of the main parties. So I think you're going to see a great swathe of voters voting for independent small parties like us. So we're certainly not the favourites, but we're a grassroots organisation who's doing things without a huge amount of money and we're doing pretty well. So if I get elected and go to Canberra, well, that'll be a great opportunity. If not, at least we're raising the issue and talking about it. Yeah,
and that was a great use of the word grassroots. Miles Hunt, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Cheers, Chris. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
That was Miles Hunt from the Legalise Cannabis Party speaking with me there, and Jacqui Lambie before him. What did you take away from these two chats? I mean, Jacqui's comments about the two major parties and lack of transparency definitely caught my ear, as did Miles's confession that the party wants to disappear once they've done what they've promised. But I do want to hear from you, as we always do. If you're listening on Spotify, drop us a comment or leave us a review on Apple, or head on over to our Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and leave us a comment or a DM. That is it for this episode of The Briefing. Don't forget, we have another episode hosted by Natasha Belling with you this afternoon. And as always, Tara Cassidy and I will be back in your feeds tomorrow morning with another dose of headlines and an interesting deep dive. I'm Chris Spyrou. I'll catch you next time.
Listener.